My mom threw me a birthday party last week. I walked into the diner expecting awkward small talk and maybe a backhanded compliment or two. What I got was a cake with my name on it and a message written in bright pink frosting. Oops, still a disappointment. The entire table exploded in laughter. My mom clapped like it was the funniest thing she'd ever seen. Someone yelled, "Come on, it's just a joke." I didn't cry, didn't scream, didn't defend myself. I just stood up, picked up my bag, and walked out. 2 days later, my entire family was in full-blown panic, and it had nothing to do with that cake. My name is Carly. I'm 27 years old, and this is the story of how a birthday cake joke became a courtroom lawsuit that cost my family their house. But before I tell you what I whispered to my uncle that night, what I found in my dad's office, and how it all ended in front of a judge, hit that subscribe button. Because this story goes places nobody saw coming, and I want you here for all of it, now. Let me back up and introduce you to my family, because you need to understand the pattern that had been building for 27 years before that cake ever existed. My mother, Sharon. Picture perfect posture, impeccable timing, every gesture calculated for maximum impact. The kind of woman who can turn a compliment into a criticism so smoothly you don't notice the knife until you're already bleeding. She had this way of setting up moments, family dinners, holiday gatherings, birthday celebrations. Everything was a stage, and she was always the director, and the star, and the critic all at once. Growing up, I learned that her love came with a scorecard. Good grades meant approval, achievements meant affection, but the bar kept moving. Straight A's weren't enough if you didn't also volunteer. Volunteering wasn't enough if you weren't also athletic. Being athletic wasn't enough if you weren't also socially successful. There was always something I wasn't doing well enough. Always some way I was falling short of the version of me she'd decided should exist. My father, Gregory. Shoulders permanently hunched from years of carrying tension he refused to acknowledge. Eyes that tracked every conversation without ever joining them. The man who perfected the art of being present while absolutely refusing to participate. He'd watch Mom's performances from the sidelines, see the cuts land, hear the comments that stung, and he'd do nothing. Not because he was cruel, because he was conflict-averse to the point of paralysis. Stepping in meant taking sides. Taking sides meant disrupting the peace. And peace, even fake peace, even peace built on one person absorbing all the damage, was better than confrontation. I used to think he was weak. Now I understand he'd just made a different calculation. Protect himself by staying neutral. Let me absorb the hits so he didn't have to. My younger brother Dylan, 4 years younger than me. Phone permanently attached to his hand, recording everything, posting everything, living for the moments when someone else becomes the content. He'd learned early that survival in this family meant being entertaining. If Mom was laughing at you, she wasn't criticizing you. If she was focused on me, she wasn't focused on him. So he became the class clown, the one who'd crack jokes during tense moments, the one who'd film awkward situations and post them for strangers to laugh at, the one who'd choose views over loyalty every single time. And me, the oldest, the one they measured against every timeline, every milestone, every definition of success they'd decided mattered. I was supposed to be perfect, the daughter who made them look good, the success story they could mention at parties, the proof that they'd done parenting right. But I wasn't perfect. I was messy and uncertain and trying to figure out who I actually was underneath all their expectations. And in this family, being anything less than perfect meant being the problem. I'd learned early that in this family, love came with conditions. And the main condition was, be what they needed you to be, when they needed you to be it, and never ask questions. Don't question why Mom always had to have the last word. Don't question why Dad never stepped in. Don't question why Dylan filmed your worst moments for internet points. Don't question why your successes were never quite enough and your failures were discussed at length. Just smile. Say thank you. Keep showing up. Keep absorbing. Keep being the easy one. Because if you pushed back, if you asked why, if you set a boundary, then you were difficult, ungrateful, too sensitive, making a big deal out of nothing. So I learned to swallow things, learned to let comments slide, learned to laugh at jokes that weren't funny, learned to minimize my own hurt to keep everyone else comfortable. And for 27 years, it worked. Sort of, in the way that slow poisoning works. You don't die immediately. You just get sicker and sicker, and don't realize how sick you've become until you're barely functioning. By the time that birthday rolled around, I was barely functioning. I'd graduated college 6 years earlier. With loans. Lots of loans. Because apparently there was no money saved for education. Because I'd been told we were a family that didn't have that kind of money lying around. Because I'd never thought to question that narrative. I'd bounced between jobs, marketing coordinator, social media manager, freelance graphic design, nothing that felt like a career. Everything that felt like survival. I lived in a studio apartment that was basically a bedroom with a hot plate. I drove a car that made concerning noises but still technically ran. I had $300 in my checking account on a good month and $47 on a bad one. And every family gathering became a referendum on my failure to thrive. Mom would ask about work in that tone that meant she already knew the answer was disappointing. Dylan would make jokes about my humble lifestyle. Dad would stay silent, but his silence felt like agreement. And I'd sit there, smiling, nodding, making excuses, minimizing, absorbing. Because what else could I do? They were family. So when Mom called about the birthday dinner, I already knew what I was walking into. But you keep showing up anyway, because they're family. Because maybe this time will be different. Because hope is a stubborn, stupid thing that doesn't know when to quit. Before I tell you about that night, let me know you're here. What time is it where you are? Where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. I'm curious how far this reaches. The diner looked like it was frozen in 1955. Red vinyl booths with duct tape covering splits in the seats, chrome edges everywhere catching the fluorescent lights, neon buzzing over the counter spelling out Joe's in cursive that flickered every 3 seconds like it had a nervous tick. The smell hit me first. Grease and coffee and something sweet and chemical from whatever air freshener they'd plugged into the wall. The jukebox in the corner was playing something from the 70s that nobody was actually listening to. I spotted our booth immediately. Corner position, maximum visibility. Mom had chosen well. She was already holding court when I arrived. Perfect posture, one hand around a sweating glass of iced tea, the other gesturing as she told some story to Dad and Dylan. Her voice carried just far enough that nearby tables could hear her if they wanted to. She looked up as I approached. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. It never did. Not for me. "There she is," she announced, loud enough for the tables around us to notice. The birthday girl. I slid into the booth across from her. The vinyl was cracked underneath me. One of the chrome edges was missing, leaving a sharp corner that caught my jacket. Mom took me in like she was inspecting produce at the grocery store. My outfit, my hair, the way I held my water glass, every detail cataloged, every imperfection noted. "You look tired," she said. Not concerned, not worried, just observing. The way you'd point out that the milk was expired or the grass needed mowing. "Long week," I said, keeping it neutral, keeping it safe. "Still looking for work?" There it was. Question number 1. The job. The constant source of disappointment. The thing we couldn't get through a single conversation without discussing. I'm freelancing. Building my portfolio. She made this little sound. Not quite a laugh. Not quite a sigh. Just this small exhale that said more than words could. Freelancing. She said it the way you'd say, playing pretend or making excuses. Your cousin Jessica just made partner at her firm, 26 years old. Can you imagine? Partner. I could imagine, because she'd told me 3 times already, at Thanksgiving, at Christmas, in a text message 2 weeks ago with a link to Jessica's LinkedIn profile that I hadn't asked for. Dad shifted in his seat, cleared his throat, said nothing. Dylan was on his phone, filming something, his food maybe, or the flickering neon, or me sitting there getting dissected across the table. Hard to tell. He'd post it later regardless. The server came over, young kid, probably 19, name tag that said Emma with a smiley face sticker next to it. She took our orders with the kind of enthusiasm that meant she was still new enough to care. The food came fast, burgers that sagged in the middle, buns that left grease on your fingers, fries swimming in oil, milkshakes thick enough to give you an instant headache. Mom picked at her salad, which she'd ordered specifically so she could pick at it and comment on everyone else eating actual food. Another performance, another way to position herself as the disciplined one, the one with self-control, the one who was better. "So," she said, spearing a cucumber with her fork, "have you thought more about going back to school? Marketing certificates, data analysis, something that might actually lead somewhere." Somewhere. Code for somewhere I'd approve of, somewhere that looked impressive, somewhere that would give her something to brag about at book club. "I'm working on some projects right now," I said, "building client relationships. It takes time to establish yourself." "Time," she repeated, letting the word hang there. "You've had 6 years. Jessica had her MBA in 2. Jessica again. Good old Jessica, the golden child, the success story, the one who made all the right choices and ended up exactly where a person was supposed to end up. I wanted to point out that Jessica's parents had paid for her MBA, that Jessica had lived rent-free in their guest house until she was 25, that Jessica hadn't spent 6 years paying off undergraduate loans that kept growing faster than she could chip away at them. But I didn't, because saying any of that would make me sound bitter, jealous, like I was making excuses for my failures instead of taking responsibility. So I nodded, pushed a fry through ketchup, watched it fall apart. Dylan filmed me without looking up, probably going on his story. Sad birthday dinner with some filter that made the lights blur, all artistic and melancholy. Dad studied his burger like it might have answers written in the pickles. His jaw worked like he was chewing words he'd never spit out. The conversation drifted. Mom's book club drama, Dylan's classes that he wasn't really going to, Dad's coworker who'd retired and now he had to pick up extra shifts. Everything except me, or rather, everything except what I was doing wrong. Until Mom circled back. She always circled back. "I worry about you," she said, using that voice, the one that sounded concerned but felt like a threat. "You're almost 30. Most people your age are buying houses, getting married, building something stable, something real. I was 27, but who's counting? I just want you to be okay," she continued, putting her hand over mine, warm and gentle and wrong. "I want you to have what other people have, security, success, a life you can be proud of." The words sounded nice. They always sounded nice. That was Mom's gift. She could package judgment in concern, dress up disappointment as love, make you feel guilty for not being what she needed while pretending she only wanted what was best for you. I felt it settling over me again, that familiar weight, the one that said, "You're not enough, you're behind, you're the problem," the one that made me want to apologize for existing in a way that didn't fit their expectations. But underneath that weight, something colder was forming, something that had been building for years and was finally reaching a breaking point, something that was done being sorry. If you're enjoying this story so far, do me a favor. Hit that like button. Let me know you're here. Because what happens next changes everything. The plates cleared. The table went quiet in that expectant way that means something's coming. Mom glanced toward the counter, once, twice. A look that said she'd planned something and couldn't wait for the reveal. Dylan sat up straighter, phone ready. Dad rubbed his palms on his jeans. Then I saw the server nod toward our booth and disappear through the swinging kitchen door. My chest tightened. That instinct you get when you know something bad is about to happen, but you're locked into the moment and can't leave. The server came back carrying a sheet cake on a plastic tray, candles flickering as she walked. Conversations at nearby tables stopped. People turned to watch. The cake landed in front of me. For exactly 3 seconds, I let myself believe Mom had done something nice, something normal, something that didn't have a hook hidden in it. Then I read the writing. Big. Pink. Impossible to miss. Oops, still a disappointment. The table exploded. Laughter so loud the jukebox disappeared underneath it. Mom pressed her hand to her chest in absolute delight, like she'd landed the joke of the century. Dylan's phone was up, catching every second, his grin wide, his thumb already moving toward the post button. Dad watched me, not laughing, just watching, waiting to see what I'd do. Someone at the next table over laughed too, a stranger, laughing at my birthday cake. I sat there, under cheap neon lights, staring at words written in frosting that said out loud what they'd been thinking for years. I wasn't misreading this. I wasn't being too sensitive. This wasn't a joke that went too far. This was how they saw me. This was what they wanted me to know, and they'd paid for it. Put it on a cake, presented it in public, with candles. I didn't cry, didn't yell, didn't give them the reaction they were filming. I pushed my chair back, picked up my bag, stood up. Mom's laughter cut off. "Carly, sit down, it's just a joke." I didn't look at her. Turned toward the exit. My Uncle Keith stepped into my path, hand on my arm. "Don't make a scene." I looked at him. This man who'd always positioned himself as the family peacekeeper, the reasonable one, the one who smoothed things over. I leaned in close, like I was about to apologize, and whispered one sentence in his ear. His face went white. Hand dropped from my arm. I walked past him, out the door into the parking lot, got in my car and drove home. Didn't look back. Didn't answer the texts that started flooding my phone 30 seconds later. Just drove. If you're not subscribed yet, now's the time, because this is where things get interesting. What I whispered to my uncle was this. I found the folder in Dad's office. I know about the education fund, and I kept copies. 6 months earlier, I'd helped Dad clean out his home office, moving boxes, sorting papers. The kind of tedious favor you do because family asks and you haven't learned to say no yet. Most of it was exactly what you'd expect. Old tax returns, warranty cards for appliances that died years ago, bank statements from accounts that barely mattered. Then I found a folder in the back of a box pushed into the corner, cream-colored, worn at the edges, my name written across the front in Dad's handwriting, underneath, Education. My hand shook when I opened it. The first page was an account statement from an investment company, opened by my grandfather, Donald, before he died. The description, College Fund for Carly. I flipped through the pages, regular deposits, small at first, then bigger. The balance climbing month by month, year by year. My grandfather had been setting aside money for my college education, building a fund so I wouldn't have to drown in loans the way he had. The account had grown to nearly $80,000 by the time I turned 17. Then the deposits stopped, and the withdrawals started. Large chunks, pulled out in irregular amounts, sometimes weeks apart, sometimes closer together. Mom's name on some withdrawal slips, Uncle Keith's on others, notes that said family emergency and temporary loan and will replace. By the time I was 18 and filling out financial aid forms at our kitchen table, the account was empty, closed, gone. I'd sat there calculating loans and interest rates and repayment timelines, while $80,000 that had been meant for me had already been spent on things nobody ever explained. Nobody told me it existed. Nobody told me it was gone. Nobody thought I deserved to know. I took photos of every page with my phone, put the folder back exactly where I found it, finished helping Dad move his boxes, and I didn't say a word. Not then. But I kept those photos. And 6 months later, standing in that diner with "Still a Disappointment" written in frosting, I finally understood what to do with them. 2 days after the birthday dinner, my phone started ringing and didn't stop. Mom, Dad, Dylan, Keith. Aunts I hadn't heard from in 2 years. Cousins who'd never bothered to text before. Even my mom's book club friend who I'd met exactly once at a Christmas party. Every single one of them wanted to know the same thing. What did I mean about the education fund? I ignored all of them, let the calls go to voicemail, watched the texts pile up, unread, unanswered, because I was done explaining myself, done making them comfortable, done being the one who had to smooth things over after they'd hurt me. They could sit in that uncertainty, they could panic, they could wonder exactly how much I knew and what I planned to do with it. Let them feel a fraction of what I'd felt filling out loan applications while they spent money that was supposed to be mine. Then Mom showed up at my apartment. 3rd day after the diner, 7 p.m. I was on my couch eating leftover Chinese food and watching a show I wasn't really paying attention to. The knock was loud, aggressive, not a polite, "Hello, may I come in?" knock. "I'm coming in whether you want me to or not" pound. I looked through the peephole. Mom, standing in the hallway, arms crossed, face set in that expression that meant she'd decided she was right and I was being unreasonable, and this conversation was going to end with me apologizing. I thought about not opening it, thought about staying quiet and letting her think I wasn't home, but that would just delay this, and I was tired of delaying things. I opened the door, didn't step aside, didn't invite her in, just stood there in my doorway holding a container of lo mein and waiting. "You need to stop this," she said, voice tight, controlled, the way she talked when she was furious but trying to maintain composure. "Whatever you think you're doing, whatever Keith told you I said, you need to stop." "I'm not doing anything," I said, calm, flat. "Keith said you're threatening to—" She stopped, recalibrated. "He said you mentioned something about legal action." "I didn't threaten anything. I just told him I know about the education fund. And I do." Her face did something complicated, a mix of anger and fear and calculation, like she was trying to figure out exactly how much trouble she was in while simultaneously preparing her defense. "That money saved this family," she said, shifting tactics, going for justification instead of denial. "You don't understand what we were going through. Your father's hours got cut. Keith lost his job. We had bills, real bills, grown-up responsibilities you wouldn't understand." "You're right," I said. "I don't understand. Because nobody told me. You took money my grandfather set aside specifically for my education and spent it without asking. Then you watched me take out loans, watched me stress about interest rates and repayment schedules, and you never said a word. We were going to pay it back. It's been 9 years." Silence. She didn't have an answer for that. Couldn't justify 9 years of silence with, "We were going to." She tried another angle. "If you take this to court, you'll tear this family apart." And that right there, that sentence, that's when I finally understood something I'd been too afraid to see clearly before. She didn't care that she'd taken my money. She cared that I might make her face consequences for it. She didn't care that I'd been hurt. She cared that I might hurt her back. She didn't care about what she'd done. She cared about whether she could still control how I reacted to it. I looked at her standing in my doorway, still trying to manage the narrative, still trying to make this about my reaction instead of her action, still expecting me to swallow my hurt and protect her from the fallout of her own choices. "You already tore this family apart," I said. "I'm just making sure there's a record of when it happened and who did it." I closed the door, locked it, and walked back to my couch and my lo mein. She stood there for another minute. I could hear her breathing through the door, could feel her deciding whether to knock again or leave. She left, and I called a lawyer. Hit that subscribe button if you want to see how this ends, because the courtroom scene? Worth the wait. The lawyer's name was Mitchell. I found him through a legal aid website that specialized in family disputes, mid-40s, tired eyes, salt and pepper hair that needed a trim, the kind of guy who'd seen every version of family drama and stopped being surprised by any of it. His office was small, one room above a dry cleaner. The building smelled like steam and fabric softener. The waiting room had 3 chairs and magazines from 2019. But when he looked at my documents, his eyes got sharp, focused. I showed him everything, the photos of the account statements, the withdrawal slips with names and dates, the notes scrawled in margins, the final closure statement. He looked through it all twice, made notes, asked specific questions about timing and amounts, and whether I had any communication about the fund in writing. I didn't, because nobody had ever mentioned it to me. Not when it existed, not when they were draining it, not after it was gone. That silence was its own kind of evidence. Mitchell leaned back in his chair, steepled his fingers, asked one question. "Do you want the money back or do you want to make a point?" I didn't hesitate. Both. He nodded, like he'd been hoping I'd say that. "That's going to cost them more than dollars. You understand that? Court filings become public record. Family members might have to testify. This won't stay quiet." "Good." He smiled. Small. Grim. "Okay then, let's build a case." The lawsuit was filed 3 weeks later. Misappropriation of funds, breach of fiduciary duty. The legal terms were cold and clinical and perfect, stripped of emotion, just facts, just numbers, just actions and consequences. Mom tried to settle immediately, called Mitchell's office within 24 hours of being served, offered partial repayment, $10,000 up front. The rest when things stabilized. I said no. This wasn't about partial repayment. This wasn't about them paying back what was convenient and comfortable. This was about standing in front of someone with authority and having them say out loud, "What you did was wrong." Keith called too, not my phone, Mitchell's office, tried to negotiate, offered $15,000 if I'd drop it. I said no again. The money wasn't the point anymore. The money had never really been the point. The point was that for 27 years, they'd treated my future like a resource they could mine whenever they needed to. They'd made decisions about my life without consulting me. They'd taken something that wasn't theirs and expected me to just accept it. And I was done accepting things. The hearing was set for a Thursday morning, 6 weeks after I'd filed. I showed up at the courthouse at 8:45 a.m., wearing a dress I'd borrowed from a friend because I didn't own anything that looked sufficiently court-appropriate. The building smelled like floor cleaner and old paper. Security was thorough. I had to take off my shoes, empty my bag, walk through a metal detector that beeped for reasons nobody explained. Courtroom 3B, second floor, small room, wooden benches, fluorescent lights that hummed quietly. Mitchell was already there, setting out documents in neat stacks. He gave me a small nod when I sat down. Across the aisle, Mom and Keith sat with their lawyer, a man in an expensive suit who looked annoyed to be handling a family dispute. Dad was there, too, in the back row, looking like he wished he could disappear into the wood paneling. Dylan wasn't there. He'd taken Mom's side on social media but couldn't be bothered to show up in person. Typical. The judge was a woman in her 60s, sharp eyes, gray hair pulled back. The kind of face that had seen too much human nonsense to be impressed by any of it. She called the case, asked for opening statements. Mitchell laid it out clean. No drama, no emotion, just facts. Showed the documents establishing the fund. Showed the designation that named me as the beneficiary. Showed years of deposits from my grandfather with handwritten notes about my future. Then showed the withdrawals, every single one, with names and dates and amounts. Their lawyer tried to paint it as family necessity, unexpected expenses, difficult years, hard choices. They implied that any reasonable parent would have done the same, that family helped family, that technicalities about whose name was on an account didn't matter when people were struggling. The judge listened without much visible reaction, then asked one question. Was Carly informed that this money existed? Silence from their side of the room. Was she consulted before funds were withdrawn? More silence. Was any attempt made to repay these funds before this lawsuit was filed? Their lawyers started to explain about intentions and circumstances and plans that hadn't materialized yet. The judge cut him off. I'm not asking about intentions, I'm asking about actions. The ruling came 2 weeks later. In a written decision that Mitchell read to me over the phone because I couldn't bring myself to open the envelope. Full repayment ordered, with interest calculated from the date of each withdrawal at the standard rate for education savings accounts, plus legal fees. The total came to $124,838. $124,000, more than the original amount because of years of interest they should have been paying if the money had stayed where it belonged. Mom's house had to be refinanced. Keith took out a personal loan. The repayment schedule stretched over 5 years with monthly installments that would hurt, and none of them spoke to me after that, not at first. The silence was loud, complete. I was blocked on social media, removed from family group chats, my number deleted from contact lists. And honestly, it felt like relief, like finally being able to breathe without wondering when the next criticism was coming, like being allowed to exist without constantly defending my existence, like freedom. Then 6 months later, another letter arrived, handwritten, 4 pages, Mom's careful looping script, an apology, sort of, wrapped in so many justifications and explanations and context that the actual sorry got lost somewhere in the middle between "you have to understand" and "we did what we thought was best." I read the first page, felt that old pull, that instinct to make her feel better, to respond, to engage, to go back to being the easy one who absorbed everything so everyone else could stay comfortable. Then I folded the letter, put it in the trash, and went back to watching TV. Cutting contact wasn't about punishing her. It was about finally understanding that love without respect isn't enough. That family isn't a free pass to take whatever they want and expect you to smile while they do it. That sometimes the only way to protect yourself is to leave. And that I'd spent 27 years trying to earn approval from people who'd already decided I wasn't enough. I was done trying to be enough for them. I just needed to be enough for me. Life after that wasn't suddenly perfect. My loans didn't disappear overnight. The monthly payments from the judgment helped, but I still had years of debt to work through. I still had to figure out who I was without their voices in my head telling me I wasn't doing it right. I started therapy, real therapy, not the kind I'd canceled to save $40 copays for their emergencies. The kind where I showed up every week and worked through decades of patterns, learned to recognize when someone was treating my boundaries like suggestions instead of requirements, learned that protecting myself wasn't selfish, it was survival, learned that the people who truly love you don't make you feel guilty for existing in a way that doesn't serve them. The money from the lawsuit went partly toward my loans and partly into an actual savings account. The first savings account I'd ever had that didn't get drained for someone else's emergency. I kept working, kept freelancing, kept building a career that didn't look like anyone's definition of success except mine. And slowly, carefully, I started building a life that felt like it actually belonged to me. I'm 27. I'm still figuring things out. I still don't have a mortgage or a marriage or a career trajectory that would impress anyone at a dinner party. But I have something better. I have peace and boundaries and the understanding that disappointing people who've already decided you're a disappointment no matter what you do is actually freedom in disguise. That cake said, "Still a disappointment." But the only person disappointed in me now is the one who wrote it. And honestly, I'm completely fine with that. If this story resonated with you, hit that subscribe button. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Tell me, have you ever had to choose between family and yourself? How did that turn out? Because stories like this matter. Boundaries matter. Your peace matters. And you being here matters too. Thanks for watching. And remember, you don't owe anyone access to your life just because they're related to you. See you in the next video.